A boundary runs through every country in the world, dividing it into two unequal groups. The first one consists of an ultra-wealthy minority, and the second one, a lower-income and poor majority. This invisible divide often becomes visible and even tangible. But what exactly creates it? Why are some people extremely poor and others fabulously wealthy? The main source of wealth is the means of production, such as factories, plants, farmlands, quarries, oil rigs, etc. However, companies themselves, without the people working for them, cannot generate profits. The employees create wealth through their own work. The owners of the companies then appropriate the products of the employees' work, whereas the employees get only a pittance in the form of wages. It is the institute of private property and means of production that divides society into two broad classes. The first one, the capitalists, is those who own major companies, financial institutions and distribution networks. The second one is the proletariat, workers, or employees who actually produce tangible assets, but do not own the means of production. Broadly speaking, the proletariat includes any wage earner who performs work making a profit for the company owner. Of course, there is also the petty bourgeoisie, or the so-called small business owners. However, this social group is quite unstable. Small business owners are constantly forced to balance on the brink of insolvency, often losing their businesses and joining the ranks of the proletariat. Only a few out of thousands manage to stay afloat and start driving off others' labor. Some of creative and tech intellectual workers receive comparatively higher salaries. They play the role of certain enablers and champions of ideas, benefiting the large capital class. However, most people in intellectual professions, including doctors, teachers and engineers, live paycheck to paycheck, just like all other workers. Even formally state-owned enterprises, like private sector firms, focus primarily on profit generation. Their regular employees make a modest living, while their top managers receive exorbitant remuneration. And even the government itself with all its institutions in fact belongs to the ruling class. In this case, declaration of equal rights for all is unimportant. Ultimately, the amount of money in a citizen's bank account determines their living conditions, quality of education and health care. In Russia, 21 million people live below the poverty line. Every fourth child is poor. According to research data, 75% of Russians run out of money before payday. The population has crushing loan and utility bill debts. At the same time, the country boasts dozens of US dollar billionaires constantly getting richer. 3% of the wealthiest Russian citizens own approximately 90% of all country funds. The income gap between the rich and the poor is growing across all countries of the planet, and what is referred to as middle class is rapidly disappearing. This is a worldwide trend. This situation can hardly be called beneficial to most of the population. But then how do the oppressors manage to maintain their social dominance? We already noted that the governmental machine belongs to the ruling class. Its power is maintained through the judiciary and law enforcement agencies. The so-called free elections are, to a large extent, a simple formality, drawing on its financial and administrative resources. Big capital easily helps their appointees enter the parliament and public administration. However, all this is not enough to retain power. The ruling class must maintain such state of the mind among the regular population, that they wouldn't dream of a different life for themselves. It must be ensured that the captives of capital sleep in their waking hours, and do not recognize their class interests. What lulls the class consciousness to sleep? Primarily, the life conditions of the working class. Millions of people on the planet work, sometimes 2 to 3 jobs, to make ends meet. Oftentimes, they have no time or energy left to think about their situation. They are permanently in survival mode. The education system and mass culture do not encourage people to think about their situation, but rather reconcile them with it, and guide to false and primitive goals. Don't worry, fit in, use, have fun, enjoy yourself. They instill law of wealth and private property. A person cannot know or imagine a different way of social development. for them. The system of social relations provides only for enslave and slave owner. They cannot imagine that the means of production can be in common property, and that labor can be organized without an effective manager. But an alternative exists, and it has been implemented in practice before. So, both Western and Russian capitalists must spend considerable resources on vilifying the Soviet system, so that no one would gain an adequate understanding of socialism. The ruling class aggressively imposes various kinds of religiousness on the society. Laws and norms of the Constitution formally guarantee a secular state. In fact, those in power force religiousness one way or another, while spreading idealistic views of the world. Fatalism, obedience and submission to exploitation in the society. A modern person's political indifference is formed in a variety of ways. People's energy is directed and channeled into charity, animal care, environmental issues, personal development and trainings. People engage in anything and everything, but steer away from the central social issue concerning all of humanity directly, wage slavery. Politics abound with pitfalls for the oppressed part of the population. Nationalists point to real or contrived national conflicts as the source of social problems, even though the problems related to national issues are almost always brought on by the capital. Labor migration is a means of lowering employee costs. International discords help the oppressors exploit the workers of different nationalities using the divide and conquer principle. Liberal politicians propose to replace the vicious, corrupted, empowered officials with good and honest-to-God ones, like the ones in leading Western democracies. At the same time, there are many people in the West who complain about the so-called crony capitalism, dominance of monopolies, corruption and lack of competition. Capitalism is what engenders these phenomena. Rotations in the offices do not change the nature of the system, but rather more often aggravate the working people's situation as a result of yet another assets redistribution. Supporters of the good capitalism are opposed by the groups that are already in power and want no change. Parties and political movements provide grist to the mill of the latter, as they emphasize hurrah patriotism and preservation of stability. They call on the oppressed to associate themselves with and unite around their oppressors. The fact that currently Russia is a deindustrialized country of peripheral capitalism, whose main function in the global economy is to supply developed countries with natural resources, hardly bothers those political forces. They are reluctant to discuss the ongoing export of capital, offshoreization, and degradation of industries, science, education and healthcare. Otherwise, they assign blame to Western intelligence service agents and the fifth column. However, who is the fifth column, if the children of acting Russian politicians, officials and civil servants live and study in the so-called potential enemy countries, and the journalists of state-run TV channels have residence permits and real estate in NATO countries? Has anyone tried to estimate what percentage of utility bills paid by Russian citizens goes into the pockets of foreign owners of domestic heating and power plants and electric power stations? How many foreigners sit on the boards of Russian companies? Capital knows no borders and no homeland. And so, it follows that conventional liberals, and similarly conventional great power nationalists, fight to get their snouts in the capitalist trough. Whoever gains the upper hand, capitalism wins in the end. The result will be the same dash: plunder and devastation of the country. Only some will plunder under the guise of great power nationalism, and others under the guise of liberalism. Finally, there are forces that actively exploit society's left-wing sentiments and nostalgia for the past. They may use the Soviet symbolics and call themselves socialists or even communist. But even then, their political program will not contain a word about class struggle, the necessity of establishing the rule of the working class, and the transition to socialism. They will advocate for reforms within the framework of the established system, or protest and collect signatures against some causes, but they will not do what really matters. They will not wake class consciousness of the working people and organize them for a real political struggle. The situation in our country is special. On the post-Soviet territory, capitalism was restored as a result of betrayal of some of the party elites. It was a long-term and multifaceted process that began in the early 50s. The destruction of the socialist state proceeded at several levels: economic, ideological and political. It was impressed on the working class that the class struggle as such had come to an end in the USSR and that socialism had won. The most important social benefits still lasted, but the working people were removed from power. The process concluded with the defeat of the working class, the restoration of dictatorship of the bourgeoisie, and the breakup of the Soviet Union. Practically everything for which the Soviet people had given millions of lives was lost. The recent years have seen an active elimination of the remaining of the once guaranteed social benefits. What several generations of Soviet people considered once and for all hard-won rights was taken away and trampled upon. People of the former Soviet republics paid an enormous price for the working class lethargy we continue to pay to date. Our country's prospects remain bleak. It doesn't take a genius to realize that when natural resources are sold off, payments collected flow abroad, while industry, science and education are systematically destroyed by the invisible hand of the market. The mounting heap of socio-economic and political challenges, technological and ecological disasters, is forcing the population of the country to rise to defend their own interests. Yes, someone still appeals to the authorities cap in hand, someone seeks help from the foreign governments in despair. Some workers' consciousness is at a level where they beg American imperialists to lift the Russian sanctions. However, there are also some who are already asserting their rights. The long-forgotten word strike is heard increasingly often. Workers of different professions are making not only economic demands, they want better working conditions, as well as safety requirements compliance and stand up to corruption and stealing. Yes, so far it extends only to regional and factory solidarity, but it becomes more and more evident that all these seemingly unrelated problems originate from one cause: capitalism. Nowadays labor is socialized more than ever. Manufacturing of every product involves in one way or another the labor of thousands upon thousands of workers from all over the world. Mankind has accumulated an incredible amount of knowledge and technologies. The production factors have an enormous power. Solving global social issues is seemingly within reach. Provide everyone with enough food, clothes, and medical help. However, it is more profitable for producers and commercial networks to get rid of the unsold products rather than build a system that would put food on the tables of those in need. Even in the first world countries, the number of homeless people is increasing, the population is growing poor, and the income gap between the rich and the poor is widening. Everything that workers produce is often impossible for workers to buy, with the low salaries paid by their employers. Inevitably, a crisis of overproduction follows. To purchase necessary goods, people take out loans, often on crippling terms. Credit, insurance, real estate and other market bubbles swell and burst. Big capital always resolves its accumulated contradictions at the expense of the working majority. Crises and wars are programmed into the system of capitalism. More and more people die, massacred in more and more cruel ways. In every subsequent world war unleashed by capital, millions of people were killed in World War I, where chemical weapons were used during the fighting. Tens of millions of people were killed in World War II. The bloodiest pages of history were written. Horrible war crimes, unprecedented genocide, death camps and atomic bombs dropped on civilians. The next global conflict could take 1 billion of human lives in the first half hour. Even if no such catastrophe of planetary scale happens, it doesn't bode well for most of the Earth's population. Oppression and exploitation will grow. A person will increasingly become a disenfranchised commodity. Deteriorating living conditions will push people to resist and seek answers. And inevitably, more and more people will turn to the theory of class struggle and to the historical experience. The collapse of capitalism is predetermined by its inherent contradictions. Capitalism once fought to succeed feudalism. Similarly, the class of the working majority will definitely take over the bourgeoisie. Progress is relentless. However, the transition to socialism will not be as calm as naive dreamers imagine. There will be no peaceful evolution of public consciousness. The moribund parasitic classes will not give up their dominant position voluntarily. They will commit any crime and cross any line to stay in power and retain their capital. But the stronger the pressure on the oppressed, the more they resist. This resistance is not to be crushed by repressions, not to be silenced by calls for national unity and cohesion. We cannot escape from class struggle in spiritual practices, flee to echo lodges, or shield with our small business. There is no safe harbor in which to wait out this global storm. No threat to social welfare and security posed by capitalism can be overcome within its boundaries. Wars and coups are unavoidable because the law of profit asserts the right of the strong to rob the weak. The swath of environmental problems will increase. As long as the destruction of nature generates profits for the bourgeoisie, they will not stop. In the 21st century, mankind has not escaped poverty, unemployment and homelessness. All these abominable phenomena are predetermined by the economic system itself, the ultimate goal of which is the profits of the private owner, not the common good. The ogre cruelty of the current masters of life, in their struggle for markets and labor force, wasn't even dreamt of by the early humans commonly seen as primitive savages. In the old days it was just a given thing that we would share. That was a part of who we are, and not only for Aboriginal people. I expect people all around the world would do the same thing before money. There wasn't such word as mine in my culture. It is ours. It collectively belongs to all of us. But today we have I, me, mine. We don't share, we don't give freely of our spirit. We don't share our things anymore. And it has become, it kills us as human beings, as a society, as a race. When I say race, I'm talking about the human race. We deny other people shelter. We deny other people food. We deny other people their survival, purely because of money. Of course, people don't need to go back to prehistoric times. However, as long as a handful of moneybags exploits workers, our society will remain essentially a slave society. Only a transition to public ownership of the means of production will truly liberate people and labor from the grip of capital. There is no third way and no middle ground. It is impossible to maintain a balance between a body and a cancerous tumor growing in it. Either the body recovers, or it is devoured by the disease. Either the power belongs to the working majority, or to the parasitic minority. All concessions attained by workers resulted from centuries of class struggle, and the ruling class typically attempts to take those away at the earliest opportunity. That is why the struggle for their economic interests alone will never be enough for the workers. The working class needs all the political and economic power. It can achieve freedom from oppression only in the fight, in all its forms. The working class has the strength to do so, and a massive advantage over the parasites. Workers have the numerical majority. Besides, the proletariat has a theory and successful experience of its application. In the Soviet Union, workers had proved that they could live well without the rich. At the same time, not a single rich man in history has proved that it is possible to make a profit without exploiting workers. A conscious class struggle is not tearing your shirt, not rioting relentlessly, and not bringing about public disorders. True liberation begins with scientific understanding of one's class interests. It is indivisible from discipline and organization, from solidarity of workers, solidarity on a global scale. This struggle can succeed only under the leadership of the political party of the working class. What kind of world will our children inherit? A world ruled by glamorous apes crazed by total permissiveness and luxury and living at the expense of millions of disadvantaged workers? Or a society where there is no economic oppression and division of people by grades of worthiness, and where any working person gets a place under the sun and real rather than declarative rights and opportunities to realize their full potential? Every person, regardless of their origin and social status, will have to make a choice for justice and against oppression, or for oppression and against justice. No one will be able to stand aside.